discovered the incredible blind date that transformed a poor mechanic's life with the CEO's Paralyze. Jack was bent over the hood of a battered pickup, grease-stained hands working deftly to replace a worn-out alternator. The shop was his sanctuary, a place where the sound of clanging metal drowned out the worries gnawing at his mind. But with every clank and thud, reality crept closer. He had bills to pay, a fading mother to care for, and memories of a father lost too soon hanging over him like a storm cloud. The weight of financial stress pressed against his chest. Dreams of escape felt like a cruel joke. "You've got to try this," his friend had said, insisting on setting him up for a blind date. A tingle of excitement mixed with doubt twisted in Jack's gut. Who was he, a mechanic accustomed to the scent of oil and decay, to step into a realm produced for someone like Sarah, a CEO with a world of luxury and social standing? When Jack stepped into the warm embrace of the upscale restaurant, the laughter of patrons and clinking glasses felt abrasive against his conscience. He was out of place, an unshined diamond wandering among polished stones. Across the table sat Sarah, a woman whose confident posture and sparkling eyes radiated an allure that was almost intimidating. Her charm was a lighthouse, guiding him across choppy waters, yet as their conversation flowed easily, they unexpectedly connected over simple truths: the love of family, the grit of hard work, the importance of integrity. Yet he wondered, could someone like her really understand someone like him? As they parted ways, Jack's insecurities clung to him like shadows, growing thicker with each step away from her. When she invited him to an extravagant corporate gala, apprehension tightened around his throat. The thought of the city's elite, polished and attentive, made his stomach churn. Yet he couldn't ignore the flutter of anticipation that tangled within. As he entered the affair where laughter spilled from manicured lips and the air buzzed with money and internal war began, Jack felt the jarring contrast, insecurity jangling with determination. A mechanic amid suits and gowns, he battled against the judgmental glances that scrutinized him like a misplaced part in an engine. Each whisper pierced through his resolve, his thoughts racing, questioning his worth. How could he belong here? He felt small, inadequate, time-worn. Just then, a familiar voice broke through the noise. "Jack, right?" Sarah's presence wrapped around him like a lifeline, yet even as she embraced him, Jack could sense the piercing gazes of her colleagues noting, types like him. He wanted to bolt. Every instinct told him to escape back to his garage, where the smell of oil soothed rather than stung. But the look in her eyes, a fierce protective spark ignited by her indignation, made him hesitate. Suddenly, disaster struck. A chaotic incident unfolded, fading the vibrant atmosphere into a chaotic scene of panic. In that moment, Sarah was paralyzed, both physically and emotionally, dragging Jack into the whirlpool of corporate chaos already swirling around her fragile reputation. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jack stood on the precipice of uncertainty, fear gnawing at him. Torn between his growing feelings for Sarah and the chaotic decision-making at the gala, he found himself pulled deeper into a world he didn't understand. Would he fight for her recovery and her right to reclaim her position? Or would he retreat back to his garage, back to the comfortable grind of his simple, stable life? The choices loomed heavier, like a weight he couldn't shake. With each passing day at the hospital and in the boardroom, Jack's strength and resolve were tested. Did love hold enough power to transcend the chasm of their worlds? Or would the burdens of their lives crush what they were beginning to build? Confusion tightened around his mind, the edges blurring between hope and despair, and as he stood there with Sarah, a flicker of fear rippled through his chest. Who would he become in this new narrative? The hospital's bright lights were blinding, yet they felt softer compared to the glaring scrutiny Jack had faced at the gala. He stood at the threshold of Sarah's hospital room, his heart thundering in his chest. The soft beeping from the machines was a haunting reminder of her vulnerability. He felt unworthy to step inside, wildly oscillating between a fear of intrusion and an overwhelming urge to comfort her. Each breath he took was laden with the weight of their disparate lives. "Hey," he finally managed, voice trembling slightly as he entered the room. Sarah's gaze broke from the ceiling, her expression a blend of relief and unease. It was a stark contrast to the poised image she had presented just days ago, powerful and commanding, now diminished by circumstance. "Jack," she replied, her voice quiet, fragile. "I didn't expect to see you here." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and fears. What could he offer? Words of encouragement felt insufficient standing against the encroaching tide of corporate expectations and her own self-doubt. But as he stood there, grappling with the enormity of the moment, something stirred within him, a courage he had never fully recognized. "I wanted to make sure you were okay," he said, stepping closer. "I mean, I know how tough things can get." She looked at him, a flicker of something understanding? Gratitude? Crossed her features. This was not just an act of sympathy. It was a genuine connection, a shared humanity in their struggle against overwhelming forces. "I can't go back to the company just like this," Sarah said, her eyes darting away, overwhelmed. "What will they say? What will they think of me?" Her words resonated deeply with Jack, challenging the demons he had faced his entire life, the constant fear of judgment because of his status. "Does it matter what they think?" He shot back, a spark igniting in his chest. "What matters is what you think of yourself. You're more than just your title, Sarah. You're more than their expectations." Something shifted, her brow furrowed as she weighed his words carefully. "Easier said than done," she muttered, her head drooping. In the depths of his gut, a light flickered. What if he could show her strength? He thought about the engines he repaired, how every blemish told a story, but didn't he define the machine's purpose? He had a chance to convey that wisdom to her, to help her remember her worth beyond the corporate facade. "Can I share something with you?" he began, sensing her hesitance. "When I was at the garage, my boss would say that every car has a story, that we can't judge them by the rust on the outside or the noise they make. Maybe life is the same. Right now, this moment is just part of your story, not the whole thing." His sincerity cracked through the walls around her, and he could see it. Her defenses lowered slightly as she absorbed his perspective. "You think I'll bounce back from this?" she asked, the words tentative as if she were testing the waters. "I know you will," he said, stepping closer, heart racing not just from fear but from something else, a burgeoning sense of purpose. "You're tough. You didn't get to where you are by giving up. And if you need someone to remind you of that, I'll be here." Jack watched her expression shift, the flicker becoming a warm glow. Maybe he could be more than a mechanic. Maybe he could play a part not just in her recovery, but also in reclaiming their paths, two disparate lives threading closer together through adversity. As she smiled for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt himself step further away from his old self. He was more than oil and grease. He was capable of inspiring change, starting with the woman before him. But as light flooded the room, another shadow loomed, a corporation hungry for power and struggling to adapt to crises. Outside the room, the stark contrast of the corporate world awaited, and Jack's pulse quickened at the thought of the upcoming board meeting. He knew he would have to confront the discomfort in his heart again, stepping into the corporate spotlight, not just as an outsider but as a player in this unfolding narrative. Could he stand firm while the stakes were raised, not just for Sarah's sake but for his own transformative path? What steps would he take to solidify his newfound resolve? The shadow of doubt remained, waiting to test him. The moment of truth was coming sooner than he anticipated. The sterile smell of antiseptic mixed with the subtle hum of the hospital machines grounded Jack as he left Sarah's room. He had felt a spark of connection in their brief exchange, a sense of purpose that now echoed in the corridor's emptiness. Yet, that exhilaration was overshadowed by the looming corporate board meeting. He exited the hospital, feeling as though he had just shifted from one universe into another, the transition jarring and disorienting. His thoughts were a whirlpool of emotions, anxiety, determination, and the flicker of newfound power. Could he actually navigate the corporate labyrinth where he had always felt like an outsider? He had always shunned the boardroom, preferring the grease-stained comforts of the garage. But if he was to support Sarah's return to the corporate world, he had to contribute to that environment, understand its complexities, and confront its demands. As he arrived at the company's headquarters, the glass facade gleamed ominously in the afternoon sun, a stark contrast to his blue-collar roots. Jack paused at the entrance, every fiber of his being gripped by uncertainty. He saw high-ranking executives in their tailored suits moving with an air of purpose, and his stomach twisted with self-doubt. Despite everything he felt for Sarah, would he be enough to hold his ground? Taking a deep breath, Jack squared his shoulders and stepped inside. The lobby buzzed with chatter, the atmosphere electric with ambition. He approached the elevators, mentally rehearsing the points he wanted to raise. Even if he succeeded in standing as an equal in that room, he could not shake the feeling that he belonged in the grease and grit of his old life, not in the polished boardroom figures. As the elevator doors slid closed, he confronted his reflection in the mirrored walls. Was this image of him a mechanic and business casual an illusion? There was an undeniable power in the steel of his resolve, a whisper that kept urging against the swell of fear. Jack clenched his fists, whispering words to himself as if they were a talisman against self-doubt. He wouldn't just survive, he would thrive. When the elevator opened at the boardroom floor, he could feel the palpable tension radiating from behind the closed doors. The moment of truth loomed like a thunderstorm, dark and chaotic. He had to challenge the very foundations of his perceptions, not just of himself, but of those who had held status as a shield. Inside, executive voices mingled, discussing strategies for managing the fallout from a recent scandal. Jack held back, waiting patiently as they consulted on projections and metrics that seemed alien to him. But then he couldn't resist the urge to speak. He needed to confront not just what was being said but what was not being said, the human cost often overlooked in the pursuit of numbers. He cleared his throat, drawing the eyes of board members who momentarily halted their deliberations. "Can I share something?" he averred, the words slipping out before he could rethink them. Silence fell, punctuated only by the sound of the chairs shifting as they turned towards him. Every engine has a story. When they break down, we have to dig deeper to understand why. When you focus solely on the metrics and overlook the people affected, you lose sight of the full picture, he continued, channeling the fiery resolve he had built since visiting Sarah. Jack watched their faces, feeling the charged energy in the room. The skepticism mixed with intrigue, and for the first time, he realized the authority he carried wasn't defined by his status, but by his experiences and the truth he chose to share. He felt himself transform, stepping boldly into that space where he once would have only observed. Would they shift their approach, or would they cling to their numbers as they had before? As he prepared to deliver his arguments, fingers trembling with a mixture of fear and ambition, he could see each board member's eyes narrowing in thought. What would happen next? Would his words resonate beyond the walls, finding a place among the hearts that had been silenced by corporate protocol? Jack knew he was teetering at the edge of change, but was it the kind he sought, or would it expose him even further? The stakes grew clear as a new voice echoed in his mind. The outcome of this meeting could change everything, not just for Sarah but for him. He was on the verge, ready to plunge into unknown depths. As the room held its breath, he knew one truth remained: he had stepped into the light. But could he remain there long enough to flourish before falling back into the shadows? Jack sensed a shift in the air as the boardroom held its collective breath, tension thick enough to feel like it had weight. He couldn't back down now. The stakes were higher than they had ever been in his life. As the murmurs subsided, he felt their eyes piercing through his facade, seeking either validation or ridicule. His heart raced, a relentless drumbeat urging him forward. "This isn't just about making profits, it's about the lives we impact," he asserted, his voice gaining strength. "Every cut to the budget, every layoff, every focus on the bottom line comes with consequences." The hesitation that had gripped him melted away as he recalled Sarah, her determination to rise despite her challenges. This wasn't just a board meeting, It was a crucial juncture for him to assert a different kind of leadership. One of the executives opened his mouth to interject, a glint of condescension on his face, but Jack pressed on, desperation fueling his resolve. What if we consider not just our shareholders, but our employees' stories? Think of the mechanics, the assembly line workers. How do we justify their suffering in pursuit of another quarter's gains? The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some exchanged glances, their expressions betraying a blend of disapproval and curiosity. Jack's pulse quickened as he read the room's dynamics, grappling with their unexpected attention. He felt the weight of their skepticism, but instead of retreating, he leaned into it. This company can be a force for good, he challenged, his determination slicing through his anxiety. If we genuinely invest in our people, if we bring back the humanity into our practices, we'll not only build loyalty but also innovation. Imagine a workforce that knows they are valued, not expendable. That trust translates to commitment and creativity. The words tumbled out, a torrent fueled by years of feeling undervalued in his own realm. The mechanical world had its rough edges, but it was rooted in authenticity, those emotions translated into tangible results. Here, amidst the sterile chrome of the conference room, he clung tightly to this truth. His eyes fixed on a few nodding heads, igniting a flicker of hope within him. What you're saying is idealistic, a woman finally spoke up, her tone sharp yet curious. But realism dictates we can't always take the personal route. It's a business. I'm not asking for a revolution, Jack shot back, emboldened by the fire of their exchange. I'm asking for evolution. This business has to evolve to face the future. Value-driven companies outperform those fixated strictly on profit. We have a chance to lead a change that others will follow, to realign our priorities. It can begin with small changes, but if we don't start here, we're destined to perpetuate the same cycle. The room hummed with the tension of his words, palpable and charged. He caught sight of a few skeptical expressions softening, others contemplating his challenge. Would they dismiss him entirely, or would this moment mark the beginning of a new discourse? The internal war within him raged on. He was riding the edge of defeat while chasing the promise of validation. Let us explore a pilot program. We can start tracking the correlation between employee satisfaction and productivity, Jack suggested, his mind racing to create actionable steps. Each point he made felt like a declaration of his newfound purpose, and though seeds of doubt still lingered, the plume of determination took root, spreading rapidly through his veins. Silence ensued, and he could sense a palpable shift in the board members as they deliberated. They were considering ideas fed by a soul, not purely by analytics. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The walls that had confined him for so long began to crumble. The meeting finally adjourned, and as he left the room, he braced himself against the flood of questions lodged in his mind. Had he really made a difference? He walked the corridors with his heart still pounding, caught somewhere between anxiety and exhilaration. Glancing down, he noticed his hands still trembled slightly. Would this be the catalyst for change he wanted? Then a voice broke through the whirlwind of his thoughts. One of the senior executives approached him, his facial expression unreadable but his presence magnetic. "I'd like to discuss your proposal further. I believe there's merit in what you suggested." The shiver of disbelief coursed through Jack. A profound realization settled in that if he were to be a part of the corporate world, he had to claim his place in it. As he returned to his workspace, Jack felt an exhilarating tension crackling at the edges of his ambition. What other challenges awaited him? Would the path of his own evolution accept him as he tried to help Sarah and others? He walked past the mechanic's bay, remembering his roots vividly, weighed down by the ever-growing anticipation of what lay ahead. The door of the future swung wide open, but would he step through? Jack's heart raced as he walked back through the corridors, every step vibrating with the adrenaline of confrontation and potential. The moment with the senior executive loomed large in his mind. It was a tiny victory, but a victory nonetheless. But now, he grappled with the question that hung heavily over him: what would it mean to evolve in this corporate world he was so desperate to change? Settling at his desk, Jack's determination transformed into a palpable anxiety, the kind that knotted his stomach. He pulled up the proposal he had drafted, but the words felt strangely hollow now. What if they didn't really care about those employees? What if the executive's interest was merely a fleeting moment of kindness in a sea of dollar signs? Jack took a deep breath. He needed clarity, to distill his thoughts into something actionable, something that would resonate. Fueled by an internal dialogue, he typed out a series of actionable outcomes for the pilot program he envisioned. Engaging in conversations with employees at all levels became critical. What do they want? He muttered under his breath. What do they really need? As he started crafting a survey to gauge employee sentiments, an unsettling realization washed over him. This could be his journey, a path lined with uncharted decisions. Yet, what if he ultimately did nothing substantial? The thought gnawed at him, triggering a momentary paralysis. To distract himself from spiraling, he turned to the mechanical bay. Watching the team at work sparked memories of his own time as a mechanic. He understood the rhythm of their labor, the way they collaborated and occasionally butted heads, their jokes biting and laughter echoing off the steel walls. It was a reminder of the very existence he was fighting for. Perhaps the answer lay in those shared experiences. He needed to draw from that authenticity. Determined, Jack approached Sarah that afternoon. She was meticulously tuning up an engine, a dance of concentration on her face. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone tentative yet earnest. She wiped her greasy hands on her rag and nodded, sensing the gravity in his voice. He shared glimpses of his ideas, the ambitions he harbored for the company, and the vision he had gleaned from that board meeting, looking for the thread that might connect her experiences with what he aspired to enact. To his surprise, a flicker of excitement lit up her eyes. "If you really want to make a difference, don't forget where we come from," she urged, her voice steady. "I've seen the disconnect at every level. They think we're just machines, too." Jack absorbed her words, pushing deeper. "What do you think we need to change? How can I help?" It was a departure from his earlier narrative of visionary leader to collaborative seeker of truth. He could already feel a shift within himself, less about authority, more about connection. As they brainstormed together, an idea emerged. They would not only gather data but curate a series of listening sessions across departments. Direct dialogue could unveil authenticity like numbers never could. This was a realization he didn't merely want to lead. He wanted to lift others, amplifying voices that had long been silent. But with that ambition came a new burden. What if they failed? What if the board dismissed their findings? The stakes had risen exponentially now that he de-anchored himself to Sarah and the rest of the workforce. As he mulled over these concerns, the urgency of the task ahead crystallized. He had to face the executives again, this time with tangible results. The afternoon waned, but the spark ignited within him burned brightly. Jack glanced over at Sarah, who was deep in thought, diligently taking notes. What would this push toward collective storytelling unveil about the underlying issues? And more importantly, what was the board's stance likely to be against this new initiative? With renewed resolve, he prepared himself for the next meeting with both excitement and trepidation. He was stepping into uncharted territory, where every decision could impact lives. Beyond the cold calculus of corporate profit. Little did he know, a formidable challenge lay ahead that would not only test his newfound beliefs but also challenge his very essence. The door to this new chapter was open. He could sense the shift, but would he have the courage to confront the real obstacles looming just beyond the horizon? Jack hardly slept that night. His mind was a tempest, swirling with thoughts about the listening sessions. They were a gamble, a risk that could either validate his ambitions or expose his naivete. What if employees were apathetic? What if the executives dismissed them outright, reducing their collective sentiment to a mere blip on a balance sheet? As dawn broke and light filtered through his apartment window, Jack resolved that understanding the climate directly from the ground level was paramount. He needed to armor himself with knowledge and courage. The next day, he dove into preparations. He sketched out questions for the listening sessions, determined to create a safe atmosphere where employees could express frustrations and ideas without the looming shadow of corporate scrutiny. Jack's hand flew across the page, and with each stroke, he transformed raw anxiety into tangible purpose. There was a feeling of power in the process, like revving the engine of a long-stalled vehicle. As he moved through the office, Jack didn't just want to be a voice, he aspired to become a conduit. Initially hesitant, he approached employees in the break room and shop floor, announcing the idea of the sessions with cautious enthusiasm. To his astonishment, reactions were overwhelmingly positive. Glimmers of hope sparkled within conversations as employees began to engage, revealing layers of dissatisfaction and unvoiced ideas. During one such dialogue, a technician named Mike pulled Jack aside. "You know, it's great you want to listen, but what happens when they tell you things you don't want to hear?" he asked bluntly, a hint of skepticism bleeding through his otherwise friendly demeanor. It was a simple question, yet it hit home with profound intensity. The fear of confronting uncomfortable truths clawed at Jack. "What if I get pushed back?" he thought. "What if I can't handle it?" Instead of hiding from that fear, Jack began to see it as a challenge. "Then we'll address it together," he said, surprising himself with the assurance in his voice. In that moment, he began to informally gather a team, a mix of employees willing to share their perspectives while also being open to the prospect of change. The process was organic, and it gave him a surge of confidence, pushing Jack to confront his insecurities head-on. As days passed, he continued refining the format of the sessions. Each iteration left him more aware of the diverse experiences lurking within the workforce. There were narratives of frustration, overwhelm, but also sparks of innovation that had been stifled. Jack realized that in order to weave these stories together, he needed more than just skillful facilitation. He needed to forge relationships built on trust. Armed with newfound direction, Jack faced another executive meeting with the kind of determination he had never mustered before. Yet anxiety still lapped at the edges of his confidence. His initial plan started to shift as he considered what he truly wanted from his dialogue with the board. Their previous dismissals echoed in his head, leaving a bitter taste. It was no longer just about presenting findings. He felt an urgent need to galvanize their collective conscience. Sitting across from the executives, Jack noticed a familiar glint in their eyes, profit-driven ambition intertwined with skepticism toward the path he was proposing. He presented a brief overview of the listening sessions, daring to propose a trial that would prioritize employee engagement as a means to enhance productivity. The murmurs turned to silence, their attention piqued but their expressions unreadable. Before the meeting concluded, he shifted gears, feeling a magnetic pull toward vulnerability. "I know changes are hard. I know there may be concerns about potential pushback. But we won't truly understand unless we're willing to listen to those we lead," he said, echoing Mike's earlier challenge. The board's response was a muted mix of curiosity and caution, the tension palpable. Jack clenched his fists under the table, unsure if he had given enough of himself. Would his sincerity penetrate the corporate armor surrounding their hearts? As he left the meeting, the weight of his vulnerability settled in a new form of responsibility. He had ventured into emotional territory, unearthing doubts and sparking curiosity, but what awaited him now? Would the seeds he planted take root or be dismissed like so many prior attempts? Jack had dared to open a door, but the moment of truth loomed on the other side. What lay ahead was unknown, but this time, he wouldn't face it alone. Would the executives embrace this new approach or continue to cling to the profit-driven paradigm? The answers were just out of reach, shrouded in the uncertainty of his next steps. Jack returned to his desk, the hum of the office fading into background noise as he processed the weight of his actions. The meeting with the executives had momentarily silenced his doubts, but tension still knotted in his stomach. He couldn't shake off the sense that a pivotal moment was fast approaching, and it was entirely within his grasp to shape its outcome. Over the next few days, Jack poured himself into his planning for the listening sessions. He crafted surveys, created engaging online platforms, and meticulously laid out logistics. His mind raced ahead, visualizing each session, the debates, the ideas that might surface. The prospect of real change felt palpable, yet the specter of failure lingered. Would the executives genuinely support his efforts once they saw the potential implications on profit margins? Motivated by a determined sense of purpose, Jack enlisted the help of Mike and a few other employees to refine the format of the sessions. They gathered at the local diner, brainstorming methods to ensure a safe space, one free from judgment. "What if we have anonymous submissions?" suggested Mike, igniting a conversation that allowed previously unheard perspectives to be voiced. Jack noted every suggestion with fervor, recognizing that these gatherings could act as a transformative bridge between the upper and lower echelons of the company. However, with each new innovation came rising self-doubt. What if these sessions invited too much scrutiny? What if the truths shared were more than he could handle? Jack felt pressure mounting, almost suffocating. Every urge to retreat surfaced, yet every time he resisted the urge to retreat, he found a flicker of resilience within. He could confront this. He had equipped himself with empathy and understanding, and most importantly, he had a team that mirrored his determination. The day of the first listening session arrived. Clarity settled within Jack as he stood in the dimly lit conference room, prepared to welcome voices long stifled. Employees filtered in, skepticism evident in their postures, yet curiosity flickered in their eyes. Jack took a breath, reminding himself of the care and preparation he had poured into the process. If he could make this space feel safe, he could facilitate meaningful dialogue. He began by sharing his own hesitations, laying bare the reality of his role and its inherent challenges. "I'm here to listen, and I can't promise all your concerns will be met, but I assure you, your voices matter," he conveyed, his voice steady. As the first employees shared their frustrations about management's lack of flexibility and understanding, Jack felt the room shift. Other employees joined in, each story uncovering layers of dissatisfaction, yet also layers of hope and camaraderie. The raw emotion was palpable, every shared experience creating an intricate tapestry of interpersonal connection. It was as if they were climbing together out of mutual isolation into a space where their concerns could be valid. But amid the camaraderie, Jack's heart raced as a familiar face spoke. One of the executives, Karen, had walked in unexpectedly. Was she there to scrutinize? To undermine his efforts? The uncertainty prickled at the back of his mind, yet, in that moment, he chose to remain present. He barely registered the heat rising in his cheeks, his focus anchored on his intention to nurture openness rather than retreat into defensive silence. As the session progressed, a new tension surfaced as Karen began to speak. Her voice was firm, but Jack could discern curiosity intertwined with skepticism. "While some of this feedback is surprising, I'm interested in solutions. What do you propose?" she queried, challenging the group to think beyond merely highlighting issues. Jack felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment he had hoped for, yet it was also a tightrope walk between confrontation and cooperation. "Let's create an ongoing forum where these discussions can live beyond this room," he suggested, eyeing employees who nodded in agreement. "We need to build this dialogue together, each of us contributing." The session ended on a tentative yet hopeful note, with employees seeing Karen not as an adversary, but as an involved stakeholder, which shifted the entire dynamic of the dialogue. Afterward, Jack stepped into his office to reflect, marveling at the unexpected alliance forming right before his eyes. Was he really effecting change? The thrill of possibility filled him, but the gravity of potential consequences weighed heavily on his shoulders. Was he prepared for the challenges that change would inevitably bring? With every step forward, Jack felt the transformative potential of vulnerability and connection, but as he prepared to report back to the executives, doubt crept back in like an uninvited guest. Had he truly gained their trust, or merely scratched the surface of a deeper issue? The moment of truth approached once more, heralding a confrontation threaded with uncertainty. Would Jack's newfound determination withstand the consequences of authenticity, or would he lay bare in their hands a vulnerability that could unravel everything he had built? Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared for the follow-up meeting with the executives. The infusion of tension mixed with palpable excitement was hard to ignore. Much had been said during the listening sessions, and the echoes of employee voices lingered in his ears, urging him to take a bold stance. Yet, as he reviewed his notes, second thoughts flickered like shadows. He arrived at the boardroom, quietly rehearsing his arguments. Would they appreciate his efforts, or would they simply see the rising costs of employee satisfaction? He had to persuade them. It wasn't just about matters of policy. It was about the souls of the people within the organization. Yet doubt persisted had he positioned the discussions effectively to align with their relentless focus on profit. Karen was already seated at the table, her expression unreadable. The other executives some glared at him as if sizing him up for a potential threat. Jack swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. "Thank you for coming together again," he started, striving for a blend of confidence and earnestness. The feedback from the listening sessions was eye-opening. People want to engage, to contribute solutions. This is an opportunity to enhance our workplace culture, but more importantly, we have a chance to invest in our greatest asset, our employees. His conviction felt raw, unpolished yet passionate. One executive, Tom, interrupted with a skeptical frown. "Investing more in employees means increasing costs. How do we know that this emotional engagement is worth the financial risks?" The wall of three-piece suits and folded arms felt impenetrable. Jack leaned into that discomfort. "It's true that there's a risk, but the data shows that companies with high employee engagement experience lower turnover rates, higher productivity, and ultimately increased profits. And we all know that morale affects performance. Our team has the potential to innovate, to create solutions that directly impact our bottom line." He watched as some expressions softened, uncertainty mingling with intrigue. But even as he gained momentum, questions loomed in his mind. Would they really understand? Were they capable of embracing this new paradigm? Karen leaned forward. "What specific changes or initiatives do you have in mind? You need to provide us with tangible plans." Beneath her stern exterior, there was a glimmer of support. Jack felt himself rise to the occasion, ready to outline a framework he had created, mirroring the ideas that employees had already shared. "Let us start with a pilot program dedicated to employee-led initiatives. We can outline clear metrics for success, combining personal development goals with team productivity measures." Contrary to the stiff atmosphere, Jack felt a surge of hope, spurred by every nod in the room. He continued laying out milestones, channels for feedback, and eventually the prospective training programs that arose in the discussions. As he spoke, Jack's words morphed into a possible reality, the invisible bonds he had envisioned transforming, as though the very fabric of the organization was beginning to weave itself together in his hands. He concluded by addressing potential concerns directly. "This isn't rushing into logistics. It's a gradual transformation built on the involvement of our employees. But more importantly, it's about trust. Trust leads to loyalty. And loyalty has an everlasting impact on how our customers perceive us." Silence fell momentarily. Jack's heart raced, unsure of the outcome. Would they challenge him, undermine his ideas, or perhaps see the value in this new direction? Finally, Tom spoke up, his tone softer now. "You've brought some compelling insights, Jack. But this is an uphill battle. We will need your commitment at every stage if we're to follow through." Jack felt the weight of those words. This was the acceptance he had sought, but it came with a stipulation. The path ahead was steep and would demand unwavering dedication. "Absolutely," he affirmed, vision crystallizing into resolve. "We're in this together, and I am ready to lead the charge." As they began to outline next steps, Jack sensed the air have shifted. Change was not merely a destination, it began to feel like a collaborative journey. Connection formed under pressure had ignited a flame in him. He was no longer just a cog in the wheel but a driving force for meaningful change. The meeting adjourned, an air of cautious optimism buzzing amongst the executives. Yet a profound question lingered in Jack's mind. Was he truly prepared for the depth of responsibility that lay ahead? As Jack exited the boardroom, adrenaline coursed through him, the stakes now elevated. He was ready to act, but could he maintain this momentum, or would the weight of his convictions become a burden? A subtle vibration in his pocket pulled his attention. A message popped up from a fellow employee who had been involved in the listening sessions. She wanted to connect about a concern that had arisen post-meeting. He felt a pang of urgency surge within as curiosity peeked at what could be an emerging conflict. What was waiting on the other side of that text? Jack paused, staring at the glowing screen of his phone. Meredith was known for her thoughtful insights, but there was an undercurrent in her message that felt disconcerting. Can we talk? It's about the meeting something isn't sitting right. He felt an instinctive tension coil within him. After a brief hesitation, he sent a quick response agreeing to meet. He moved quickly through the office corridors, the fluorescent lights flickering above creating an oddly stimulating atmosphere. Each step was a blend of excitement and foreboding. He had just begun to carve a space for himself in the corporate hierarchy, yet here was a whisper of dissent urging him to confront potential friction among his peers. Arriving at the small cafe nestled on the ground floor, he scanned the room for Meredith. She sat at a corner table, her brow furrowed in thought, a half-empty cup of coffee before her. He noticed the tightness around her lips and the way she chewed on her lower lip, a sign of her unease. "Hey, thanks for meeting me," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Jack," she started, pausing to gather her thoughts. "I want to talk about your presentation. I thought it was great, honestly. But I overheard some feedback after you left. Not everyone is on board. Some feel you might be pushing them into this initiative without considering their challenges." The words were like a slap in the face, a chilling realization that not all shared his vision. "What do you mean? Were there specific concerns?" Meredith shrugged, her frustration evident. "Some think that leadership doesn't really understand the day-to-day struggles. It's easy for the executives to see things as benefits versus costs, but for us? It feels more complicated. If we change things, will they really support that if it affects the bottom line?" Jack leaned back, eyes narrowing as he processed her words. His intentions were noble, yet maybe he had misjudged the level of readiness among the team. A knot of uneasiness formed in his stomach. He prided himself on being an advocate for his colleagues, but could he also afford to be perceived as condescending? "I had no idea there was that kind of sentiment," he admitted. "I thought we were all trying to create a better workplace together." Meredith sighed, shaking her head. "It's not that simple. Changes are often seen as threats. We need to engage with them, not just present solutions. I know the idea is to foster change, but there's a real fear of vulnerability and failure. Trust doesn't just appear." Jack nodded, the weight of her words pressing upon him. He had assumed that enthusiasm for engagement would be enough to motivate others, but now he realized that unlocking feelings of skepticism and fear was essential. This wasn't just about selling an idea, it was about guiding people through their anxiety. "Thanks for bringing this to me," he said firmly. "I need to address this head-on. We have to rethink our approach, be more empathetic to their concerns without compromising our vision." As they talked further, collaborative strategies began to emerge. Jack discovered a latent ability to translate his passion into a path of empathy and understanding, tearing down the walls built by distrust. Every idea suggested sparked a fire deep within. He began to see that his journey to leadership wasn't just about the grand vision, but about building a framework for shared success. Meredith eventually smiled, encouraged by the shift in his demeanor. "You're on the right path, Jack. Just remember, real change doesn't happen from the top down. It needs to come from within, with everyone feeling part of it." With new insights shaping his thinking, Jack felt as if he were standing at the precipice of an important transformation, both personally and within the organization. As he left, a revitalized sense of purpose coursed through him. He would not merely advocate for change, he would become a steward of it, guiding his colleagues through uncertainty. Yet a lingering question gnawed at him: how would he convince the other executives to embrace this holistic approach when they were so focused on numbers? The realization struck him hard. He needed to prepare for immediate confrontation with the very board members that had once seemed supportive. The stakes had been raised, and the next meeting would be decisive. Would he be able to foster not only enthusiasm but genuine commitment to a new way of operating? The time had come to face the true test of his leadership abilities, and he felt the weight of that impending challenge bearing down on him. The atmosphere in the boardroom was electric, a taut string ready to snap. Jack could sense the palpable pressure as he prepared to address the executives regarding the concerns from the listening sessions. He moved toward the head of the table, positioning himself confidently yet grounding himself in sincerity. This meeting would either cement his role as a voice for their employees or shatter the fragile bonds he had begun to establish. Seated before him, the board members exchanged wary glances, skepticism hanging heavy in the air. Jack's heart raced, echoing the urgency of the task at hand. He used their collective silence to anchor himself, recalling the powerful moments shared with his colleagues in the sessions. It was their stories, their struggles, that propelled him forward. "Thank you all for gathering today," he began, his voice firm but carrying a tremor of vulnerability. "I believe we must confront the feedback from our recent listening sessions directly. Our initiative for employee engagement isn't just about implementing changes, it's about fostering trust and understanding among us all." A murmur rippled through the room, and he pressed on, his resolve strengthening. "I've learned that many employees are concerned that the changes might threaten their job security or alter their day-to-day functioning without their input. We cannot afford to ignore this skepticism. It's vital for us to collaborate with them to create an environment where everyone feels heard." Jack knew he was taking a gamble, battling against previously held notions that the board valued profits first. But as he looked up from his notes, he saw Karen's eyes flicker with something approaching understanding, and he seized the opportunity. "We need to bridge the gap between leadership and our workforce, ensuring our strategy is built on collaboration rather than imposition." Tom leaned forward, skepticism lingering despite the growing interest within the room. "But how do we ensure this doesn't become a hindrance to our productivity goals? We can't compromise efficiency under the guise of being empathetic." Jack recognized this challenge as a pivotal moment, his understanding deepening. Empathy doesn't impede productivity, it catalyzes it. Companies rooted in strong cultures of trust and respect tend to see heightened engagement, reduced turnover, and more creativity in problem solving. We can establish an employee-led committee to align their perspectives with our corporate needs, fostering synergy instead of friction. As he articulated these thoughts, he felt a profound shift within himself. The mechanic in him, the one who had always scrutinized the connections between parts, was now weaving connections between people. Each example he delivered brought forth tangible metrics and success stories from companies that thrived through similar initiatives. Awareness gradually washed over the boardroom. Raindrops of skepticism broke under the deluge of his conviction. Karen interjected, "What you're proposing involves a level of commitment we're not accustomed to. How can we ensure we don't lose sight of our operational goals?" Jack leaned in, his posture demonstrating his earnestness. "Like a finely tuned machine, we need all components to work together. Involve employees at every level. Their insights provide clarity on how to align their goals with those of the business. Let us create actionable plans stemming from their suggestions, and measure success together." The silence that followed was a mix of contemplation and newfound connectivity. He had stepped beyond mere rhetoric and confronted the heart of leadership, integrating the workforce into decision-making processes. It was an approach that could defy the familiar confines. When the meeting concluded, the executives were impelled by Jack's energy, exchanging tentative smiles as they considered this expanded narrative. They might not have fully embraced his vision yet, but the wheels of change had begun to turn. Walking out of the boardroom, Jack felt a surge of exhilaration. For the first time in a long while, he could see a road ahead that bore the promise of transformation not just for Sarah, but for every individual in the company. As he re-entered the buzz of the floor, confident strides propelled him toward a new era of leadership he had long envisioned. Jack had finally proven to himself that he was more than a mechanic, he was a transformational leader, capable of echoing voices long obscured by hierarchy and empowering those with stories to share. In that moment of realization, he knew he had pierced the fog of uncertainty cloaking his future. His resolve had galvanized a dormant spirit, ready to lead with integrity, humility, and vulnerability. Jack had stepped firmly onto a path where his newfound confidence and compassion intertwined, setting forth a mission to elevate both the organization and himself. This was his transformation, a metamorphosis from the grease-stained mechanic to a budding architect of corporate culture grounded in authenticity and rooted in collaboration. And as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm glow across the office, Jack smiled. He had conquered the doubts that once consumed him and emerged victorious, and now, he was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead with solid confidence and undeniable recognition of his purpose. Jack had truly arrived. You need to subscribe now to witness the next extraordinary journey of transformation. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep these compelling stories alive. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion. What did you think of Jack's evolution? Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how personal growth can change lives forever. Don't wait even one more second to share this inspiring narrative.